I spent last spring working in London. And I think if you spent any time in London, any significant time at least, you've probably had the experience of getting lost. And this is because London, unlike Paris or Washington, D.C., is more or less unplanned. London, through the years, was allowed to grow organically. So the present-day city is a patchwork of streets and courts and lanes, all of which run together and, after a while, begin to look basically the same. And I discovered this firsthand. I'd be on my way to work or to McDonald's, and I would suddenly find myself in some tucked-away alley I had never seen before, surrounded by buildings and signs that were completely foreign to me. And this repeated itself again and again. And in London, getting lost really became a kind of routine. But while getting lost and then while getting unlost, I did have a lot of time to reflect. As a history student at Dartmouth, I've learned to see everything in deep temporal perspective. This is what the French historian Fernand Braudel calls the longue durée. So, while living in London, I naturally started to think about how people in different historical periods did exactly what I was then doing. In other words, walking the city, getting lost, finding my way. And after a little research, I discovered kind of an interesting fact. Until the 1760s, people in London had to navigate the city without the use of street name signs and house numbers. On one level, this makes sense. Despite inhabitants like Shakespeare or Samuel Johnson, early modern London was overwhelmingly illiterate. So signs reading Oxford Street or Piccadilly Circus would not have helped much. But it's still interesting to think that early modern Londoners lived in a city totally unmediated by written language. If you think about it, our own world is so dependent on written language. Words are so deeply embedded into the fabric of our everyday movements thanks to signs and maps and travel guides that it's almost impossible to conceive of an illiterate London. So with language out of the picture, I asked myself, what did people do to get around? How did they avoid getting lost? How did they give directions? The answer I arrived at was a kind of working memory. Navigating nameless streets, Londoners couldn't use the kinds of standardized addresses we use today. Instead, they used remembered landmarks, points on the mental map of the city that really ran the full spectrum of city life in this period. So palaces and cathedrals, but also things like brothels, inns, and pubs. Actually, in the course of my research, I discovered that pub signs, which are hanging wooden placards with images of everything from lions to pineapples, pub signs played a crucial role in orienting people. These were a body of fixed, memorable points, and you can think of them like pictorial addresses, which is exactly how people used them. People would actually give directions in pictures, and they would move from sign to sign and from pub to pub in order to find their way around unfamiliar parts of the city. So, sort of by accident, I had discovered the origins of the pub crawl, but also something more. Because Londoners could draw on such a huge range of buildings and signs, the process of navigating the city was really something deeply individual, deeply personal to them. Each inhabitant drew from a different memory of buildings and of more than 2,000 pub and inn signs in order to compose a particular itinerary. So for one Londoner, the journey from Charing Cross into the City of London took the form of a sequence of fanciful images, pub sign images. Start at the Red Hart, proceed to the White Lion, then the Mermaid, the Greyhound, the Bell, etc. For another walker, who actually recorded his experiences in a pamphlet that I read in the British Library, the walk was not merely personal, but it was even something religious. For this Londoner who read the lions and knights of the pub signs as Christian symbols, losing one's way and finding one's destination really became matters of faith. I think these are visions of the city that are almost impossible to imagine in a modern London of street name signs and house numbers. We don't think of mundane things like street signs as having a really profound effect on people and as disrupting centuries of cultural practice. But this is exactly what happened in the 1760s when the City of London banned pub signs and at the same time installed street name signs and house numbers. Suddenly, countless personal Londons, like the ones I've just described to you, became the more or less homogeneous city we see today, which is accessible to basically anyone who can read English. As a visitor in London myself, I was obviously thankful for this change. I don't think I would have fared too well in early modern London. But part of me was also pretty regretful, because the modern, legible city had so completely erased what came before. As a history student, I see my role as undermining even the most basic assumptions and practices that govern our lives to reveal what came before. But you don't have to be a historian to think like this. If I can leave you with one idea today, it's this: everything, no matter how seemingly ordinary, has a history. Even the most invisible aspects of our lives, the things that we don't even think about on a daily basis, change with time, and in turn, in sometimes really surprising ways, change us. I believe that thinking like a historian, applying this philosophy of the longue durée, can yield fascinating and meaningful discoveries in almost any situation. Even getting lost has a history. Thank you.